So we're continuing the Halachah and Likutey Halachot, which is discussing a Torah in Likutey Moran, which is a very important Torah, which speaks about that the most important thing that you can do in your life is to find a very great tzaddik to learn from. And the reason is twofold. The first reason is because he has what's called hasagat elokut. He has perceptions of godliness. These perceptions of godliness are the key to you coming close to Hashem. They're the key to you achieving joy. They're the key to you achieving peace in your life. They're the key to you healing from any infirmities which you might have, whether physical or spiritual. That in a sense, the tzaddik is literally like a spiritual doctor. And therefore, to the degree in which you feel far from things in your life, and obviously that's a reflection of the distance you are from Hashem, so he is the only one who has the ability to give you new perceptions, which draws you closer. Now, the second part is not just to have those perceptions, because that in itself is hard enough. But let's say you do have these perceptions of godliness, which go beyond the limited superficial understanding of the Torah, which encompasses very, very deep levels of consciousness and understanding. You also need to be able to constrict that perception for the person that's listening. That for someone like us, that maybe we've been Maltshuva for a few years, or maybe we've even been religious our whole life, but we just never heard these things before, not at this level. So to that person, he can't just get the light of the sun straight, it needs to be constricted. So the tzaddik, the doctor, is a master not just of knowing the medicine, but knowing how much to administer at each time for each person. And therefore you need to be a very great tzaddik to be able to accomplish both these things. And then for the person who's getting healing, meaning the student who's learning this deep wisdom, he needs to pray every single day that he should be attached to a true tzaddik like this, someone who's able to do this, have both the level of understanding, which will wake him up, and also that it doesn't, chas v'shalom, end up causing him damage because he's not holding at the level to be able to perceive that light. And this is the concept of waking up from sleep. Because the essence of sleep is drawn that since from here, this place, that is Malchut, meaning that his mind is constricted. That he is attached to external wisdom, and therefore, or secular wisdom, and therefore he's on a lower madrega. Because Rabbi Nachman says, how do you know where you're holding spiritually? It's the degree in which you're connected to true, genuine spiritual wisdom, higher consciousness, God consciousness. To the degree in which you are united with that understanding and you live with that understanding, to that degree you're on a higher level. To the degree in which you don't know that, and I'm not just talking intellectually, you might know it intellectually that God exists, especially let's say you grew up traditional, you grew up religious, but still you don't know it in your heart. So then you don't really know it, because the concept of knowing in the Torah is not just intellectual, it's actually when what's in your mind is engraved in your heart. That's when it's called knowing. So what's the cause, what's the barrier that's not allowing me to know Hashem in my heart, meaning that I'm able to experience and live with the fact that Hashem is the cause of everything in my life, and therefore my decisions are all based on that conscious, felt, intimate understanding, that felt perception, that sensitivity that you have been attuned to. So for this, you're going to need the tzaddik, because he's the one who's going to be able to give you the perception that you need based on when you're living, where you're sitting. And the reason and the separation, the reason for the distance between your mind and your heart is one thing: secular wisdom. What's the difference, let's say, between a person, he grows up in a community where all he ever learned was Torah, and not just in a way of, let's say, I'm learning in order to show how much I know. I am doing the mitzvot in order to check off a box. But you grew up in a family that it was so genuine, it was so real, it was so chashuv, it was so, that this was the only reality. So the reason why that kid grows up like that and he feels that in his heart is not just because that's what he knows, on a deeper level, it's because he never experienced external secular wisdom. Now you might ask, like many people do, what's the big deal with learning secular wisdom? We know it's not even a source according to the Torah, as long as it's not causing or it's not explicitly saying we don't believe in Hashem. So why is Rabbi Nachman says it's mamish asur for anybody to look at it, including, let's say, it's the Rambam's yard site, his Hilula today, alav shalom. So Rabbi Nachman said that we're very, very happy for his Mishnah Torah, the Rambam, and that this is one of the greatest works that was ever created. And we know that the Shulchan Aruch was really inspired and could only be made possible by that original Mishnah Torah. And therefore, this book is of eternal importance. And he had deep reverence for the Rambam in that sense. However, when it came to his philosophical book that he wrote for people who had questions, philosophical questions about Hashem, Rabbi Nachman says it's a sort to read that book. What's the reason he would say it's a sort to read the book of a tzaddik? And the reason is because he held that it falls under the realm of secular wisdom, that even though the Rambam meant well, that in the end, Rabbi Nachman says it's going to cause much more damage than it's going to benefit people. Because ultimately, these philosophical questions, you're going to have to go to secular external wisdom to try to explain them out. And even though you think it's good, you're actually creating a klipa of the mind. And this klipa of the mind ends up covering over your heart. And therefore, there's now a barrier between what you know in your head and then actually experiencing and then knowing that in your felt sense, your felt perception in your heart and your body. And therefore, it's very, very, very important that for a person to be able to wake up, he needs to be extricated from that secular wisdom. Because that's the only way he's ever going to be able to chap and to have what's in his head go down to his heart. Now, obviously, and it's very interesting because in our generation, all there is secular wisdom. And for a person, let's say he really wants to be close to Hashem, if he doesn't get that secular wisdom, so on paper, where is he going to ever connect? This concept of Torah is so foreign from him. Or even let's say he believes in Hashem, but still, what are the chances that the Torah is like this and secular wisdom is completely different? It's like that. So what would you need in order to not teach secular wisdom and yet at the same time be able to connect to every single person? So here is the genius and here is the tremendous chidush of Chassidut. That the Baal Shem Tov created a extension of the deepest wisdom of Torah, which is called Kabbalah, and he enclosed it in a way that every person is able to understand it. And therefore, on the one side that you need people to be able to understand, you can understand Chassidut. Everybody can. And on the other hand, on the side that you need this to be deeply penetrating, tremendously intellectually stimulating, something which goes beyond the normative way of thinking or the older ways of understanding simple levels of Torah, that for a person in our generation who's been exposed to very, very intellectual, very philosophical, very scientific ways of understanding different levels of reality. So now when he comes to understand Pshat in the Torah and Rashi, he may not, so to speak, his heart may not start dancing. And therefore, what would he need? He would actually need something that's deeper than his secular wisdom. Comes Chassidut. And therefore, with Chassidut, you're able to hit on all levels. And this, now we understand that why Rav Natan said, who is a tzaddik emet? Who is a true tzaddik? How do we know who he is? So he says there's only one way for sure. There's only one prerequisite, meaning I can't tell you exactly who it is. You're going to have to pray to Hashem to be able to know and to feel who that is. However, there is a prerequisite, and that is this person needs to be baki. He needs to be expert in the wisdom of the Arizal, who was the greatest Kabbalist who ever lived. And he needs to be baki in Torah Baal Shem Tov, in Chassidut. So obviously, if you think about it just simply, who is a person who would be baki in the wisdom of the Arizal and the Baal Shem Tov? Seemingly, Pashtus, it would only be a Hasidic master. Because who else is going to spend his life trying to gain tremendous levels of expertise, obviously in all of the Torah, But then on top of being an expert in all of the Torah, to also be an expert in the levels of the Torah of the Rizal, which is very, very deep and complex. And then on top of that, to also be an expert in the level of the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, which in some ways is equally difficult to understand, not because it's as hard as the Arizal's Torah, but because it's so nuanced and because it's so all-encompassing and it discusses every level of life, every level of psychology, every level of emotion, every level of intellect. So obviously you have to be a tremendous person to be able to be an expert in all these places. Now, this is a person who can have a saga elokut. He can have these deep perceptions of godliness, and he can give it to everybody. He can give it to the religious Jew who's been religious his whole life, who has learned all of Shas. He can give it to the person who he became Baal Tshuva a few years ago, and he believes in Hashem now, but he's still, let's say, he's not so far, or he's not so experienced in learning X, Y, and Z. He can give it to the person who he's straight out of university. In America, he just got out of UCLA or Penn State, and he himself is a self-proclaimed atheist. He doesn't believe in God at all, and he can all of a sudden he can have a conversation with this person, and it could get him thinking. It could get him, even though he himself has been a self-professed atheist his whole entire life. That wisdom is so deep, it's so penetrating, it's so much greater than anything even he has ever thought of. So he too will be able to come back. And he can wake up from his sleep as well. For this, you need the great Tzaddik, because this Tzaddik is going to be able to give it to everybody exactly where he is. And therefore, at the time of sleep, a neshama shehuya seichel, that at the time of sleep, your neshama, which is your seichel, right? Where is the level of your soul? It's called neshama. We know that there's 5 levels of the soul. The lowest level is called your nefesh. This is in your blood, meaning it's the most connected to your physicality. Then you have the higher level of your soul, which is called your ruach. Your ruach is connected to your emotional faculties. Your emotional faculties, as expressed, which are rooted in your soul, are called your ruach. This is the reason why Rabbi Yaakov Meir Shechter, who is by most, even in the Litvak world, even in the Livish world, in the traditional religious Jewish world, that they their whole entire way they conceive of Gadlut, greatness in Yiddishkeit, comes with learning of Torah, specifically in the area of Gemara and Poskim. So they even hold that he is the Gadol Ador in this area, that he's mamish, one of the biggest tzaddikim of the generation. And then obviously the fact that he happens to be a Breslover Chassid, he's obviously a master in the areas of Chassidut as well. And Rabbi Yaakov Meir Shechter, I heard in the name of Rabbi Mansour, that he saw him say this on Purim, that we know there's a mitzvah to be drunk on Purim. What's the reason that there's a mitzvah on this day and not the rest of the year? Because Purim, you have the ability to attain a higher level of consciousness than you do the entire year. That is the consciousness of the level of your soul, which is the highest place, that's called Keter. And in order to get to the level of Keter, which really is in the place that you know that everything that comes from Hashem is for the best, that you see no difference between, let's say, the suffering you've been through in your life and the trials and the tribulations and the actual good, meaning the best moments of your life, that literally, if you could only have those moments, it would be such a sweet life, that in truth, according to the level of the soul called Keter, or according to the highest levels of perception of godliness, these are exactly the same. This is alluded to because Purim, we know, is the next Chag, so it's Kedai to speak about it, that Avraham Sutton, he brings down that Baruch Mordechai, right? What does Chazal say? That you want to get so drunk that you don't know the difference between Baruch Mordechai and Arur Haman. That blessed is Mordechai, meaning that Tzaddik is blessed, and what he did for us is blessed, and that he saved us from all being wiped out in a Holocaust-like fashion. And Arur Haman, that curses Haman, that in a sense, in a very real sense, he was Hitler before Hitler, that he wanted to wipe out all the Jewish people, that he himself was a failed worker in the occupational world, and ultimately became the leader of the strongest nation in the world, in a real sense, just like Adolf Hitler, his name should be erased. And we say that you should get so drunk that you have no real different felt perception between the good of Mordechai and the horror of Haman. So Rav Avraham Sutton brings down that the gematria, the numerical value of this phrase, Baruch Mordechai, is the same exact numerical value as Arur Haman. Meaning that on the outside, which is the level of the letters, the level of the phrase, so yeah, for sure, it's a complete different sugya. That Baruch Mordechai is the greatest thing in the world. It's redemption, it's Geula, it's Mashiach. And that Arur Haman is the most horrifying Shoah that you could possibly imagine, something on the levels of the Holocaust. And yet, at their inner level, which the Gematria is always referring to the inner level of that reality, they're exactly the same. And by getting drunk, you're able to perceive that. But specifically on Purim, because there's a light which shines on Purim, you don't get the rest of the year. And that light you're able to become conscientious of. And that's the reason why if you get drunk the rest of the year, you can't achieve Baruch Mordechai or Arur Haman, because a person might learn these classes or he might learn this. And he says, well, if getting drunk helps me to achieve a deeper perception of godliness, why don't I blaze every day and I'll achieve very high levels of consciousness? And the reason is because this level of perception, which is drawn down into the world, it's only on Purim. And that's the reason why Chazal say the mitzvah is only on Purim to get drunk. And this is also the reason why Rabbi Nachman was very, very against anybody using substances for the rest of the year. So despite the fact that there is a stigma which with students of Rabbi Nachman, that there is higher levels of substance use or abuse, that the truth is that these are not students of Rabbi Nachman. These are people who have taken what they wanted from Rabbi Nachman's teachings, and they have engaged in whatever else they'd like to use. And obviously those effects will be felt in the rest of their life. So Bezrat Hashem, we should know not to do these things, and that Rabbi Nachman says it's possible to feel like that and to experience that level of being high without actually getting high. And obviously that will save you a lot of money as well, which we all need, considering we're in a COVID situation right now. Now this is the Ruach, and Rav Yaakov Meir Shechter says he was drunk on Purim, and he was screaming to his Hasidim, to his students, in the name of the Rebbe. He said, what is the most powerful thing in the world? Ruach. He said he was screaming, Ruach. Why is this the most powerful thing in the world? He said, what can stop Ruach? What can stop a tornado? What can stop a wind? You literally have a tremendous tornado. You have a tremendous windstorm that it literally will wipe out everything. There is nothing that can be stopped. It will lift you up off the floor. It will destroy everything in its path. It is the most powerful thing in the world. It's Ruach. And he says, who has Ruach? Rabbeinu, Rabbeinu. So we see what is the reason why Rabbi Nachman can take people from the lowest places, no matter what's going on in their life, and he will take that person and lift them up to the highest places if you will have the courage to go with him all the way, despite the fact that his advice and his wisdom is unique and different than the rest of the world. And the answer is because he has Ruach. Because he's like Ruach. Now you have a higher level of your soul, which is called your Neshama. Your Neshama is not your emotional faculties of your soul. It's not your, so to speak, most physical aspect of your soul. It is your level of consciousness. That's called your Neshama, your intellect. So what does it mean, your Neshama, when you go to sleep, it rises up? It means that your Seichel, your consciousness, your intellect is what goes away. It leaves you when you go to sleep. Where does it go? It enters into a state of spiritual reality, which is called emunah. So how do we understand this? If we take away the concept of faith for a second, just imagine emunah is like a vacuum in spiritual reality. It's a space which is like a womb. What happens in a womb? You take something which exists in potential, and then it's given birth to through resting in that place, like sitting in a mikveh almost. And then by resting in that mikveh that's called the womb of Malchut, while you're sleeping, meaning your neshama is resting there, then what happens is by the time that you wake up in the morning, if you have the zchut to wake up, so your neshama comes back refreshed, and you're able to now achieve higher levels of perception of godliness than you did yesterday. Why are you able to do that? On paper, you shouldn't be able to. You should be exactly the same as you were yesterday. But the answer is that your neshama goes up to this womb that's called Malchut, and it takes all the mitzvot which you did during the day, it takes all the Torah which you learned during the day, and it uses that as ammo to renew you, your neshama. And then your intellect comes back new and refreshed. Even if you feel tired when you wake up in the morning, still you actually now have a deeper ability to achieve a higher level of consciousness than you did yesterday. And that's why it says, Chadashim labakarim rabba amunatecha. That renewed in the mornings, great is your amunah. Meaning it's a Kabbalistic spiritual hint. That is, that how are you renewed in the morning? Through Hashem's Emunah, meaning through this womb in which your mind is renewed and your consciousness is rested and given new life so that you should wake up again in the morning. Because then needs that should be removed the seichel completely. That he should remove his seichel, his mind completely, and rely on Emunah only. So he says that for us, we can always go to sleep. We don't just have to wait for nighttime. Why are we going to sleep at nighttime? Because spiritually, that's when the sitra achra, the forces of negativity, are strongest. So what's the tikkun? How do I deal with challenges or obstacles in my personal life that are confusing me, which are making me feel low, which are making me feel down, which are making me feel lethargic, which are making me feel confused? Rabbi Nachman says, go to sleep. Now, it's interesting because there is a non-holy way to do this. There is a non-elevated way to do this, and that is the way of a person who is depressed. What is one of the symptoms that a person is depressed? He wants to go to sleep all the time. Now, what's the deep reason why he wants to sleep all the time? Because if he would sleep from Kedusha, then he would actually overcome his depression. What's the sleep of Kedusha? What's the sleep of consciousness? What's the sleep of spirituality, of Torah? That sleep is called Amunah. That if I kick into Amunah Shlema, that is, I remove and I stop trying to conceive or understand what's happening to me right now. I stop trying to understand how it could be good for me. I stop trying to understand how this is going to end up working out for me. I stop trying to control every aspect of my life in a time in which there is a flood taking place. There is a storm happening in my life, and everything, so to speak, is closing in on me. So if instead of going to physical sleep, I go into spiritual sleep, meaning I go into a state of complete Amunah Pashuta, and I put away my logic just for the moment, then what's going to end up happening, I'm going to refresh my neshama, so that now, later on, with the Hashem's zchut, with the merit of Hashem is rachamim on us, and we give ourselves over to completely by giving him Amunah Pashuta, simple Amunah, simple faith that everything is for the best, everything is from him, then what's going to happen is Hashem is going to give you your mind, your neshama back again, but at a higher level, and you will be able to understand what's going on with you or what took place in your life. But the only way to do that is to first go to sleep. This is the reason why a person who's constantly fighting against his situation in his life, he will refuse to give it up, so to speak, to Hashem. He will refuse to stop trying to understand how this is good for him. He must understand, or he must fix. That person will not be able to understand what's happening and will not fix to the degree in which he does this. A person can go years in doing this, and the suffering will just increase more and more because his mind is not capable right now of understanding what's happening. He needs to refresh and increase his ability to understand what's taking place in reality. For that, he needs to go to sleep. And therefore, through the time of sleep, sitra damota shalit, he's going to sleep at the time in which the forces of death in Kabbalah, they call this the side of death, in which the side of death has hold. What does that mean practically? It means that the forces of negativity, which we know are connected to the concept of death, because death the end of life was not a part of the original programming. That death, which is the opposite of Hashem, because Hashem is the concept of life. And we see this with the Tzaddik, that the person who has the veikut with Hashem, meaning he's completely attached to Hashem at all times, he's alive while he's here, and he's alive, says the Gemara, when he's not here. Meaning when he passes on from this world and he moves to another space. But a person who he doesn't have the veikut with Hashem now, he doesn't have intimacy with Hashem now, he's not alive now and not alive then. Why? Because to the degree that you're bound up with the source of life, to that degree you're alive. To the degree in which you are separated from the source of life, to that degree you're not alive, even when you're physically here. So what's the reason? Because he's life himself. So when you go to sleep, and Chazal say that you're achieving 1/60th of death. Why? Because sleep means that my ability to have the veikut with Hashem, my consciousness that Hashem is with me, has left me. That's called I'm dead. So that means what? I cannot perceive Hashem in my life, and now I have no life force. That's why I'm sleeping. Kemuva b'Zohar Kadosh. This is why the Zohar says that at the time of night, that is when the sight of death is in the world, meaning the concealment of godliness is strongest, so it's time to go to sleep. Because then departs life that's drawn from the light of the face. We know, Rabbi Nachman teaches, in the Likutey Moran Torah, Yud Gimel, that in Kabbalah, where is the revelation of godliness coming from? Where does this higher level of consciousness that lifts me up out of my difficulty, out of my suffering, and I'm able to see Hashem in a very deep way, not just intellectually, but also emotionally? Where is that light coming from that's creating joy in my life, that's giving me peace, that's helping me to achieve higher financial gains, that's helping me to be able to achieve higher levels of mastery, of spirituality? This is all coming from a place in Kabbalah that's called the Or Panim, the light of Hashem's face. This is why David HaMelech is always begging Hashem, please Hashem, show me your face. This is why Moshe Rabbeinu said, Hashem, I want to see your face. What's the reason? Because the revelation of Hashem's face is the place of all good. All concealments or constrictions in life come from Hashem hiding his face. Rabbi Nachman teaches in the second Torah of Likutey Moran that the Geula is going to come in the merit of the complete revelation of Hashem's face. And at nighttime, his face is hidden because the light of his face goes away. Just like when a person is alive, he has light in his face. And when a person passes away, that light goes away. Or if you see a real tzaddik, you will literally see that his face has an illumination, a deeper light. And it's not coming from the fact that he went to a tanning salon. You'll see he might even be pale. He might even be gaunt. He might even be very thin. And yet his face shines. Where is his face shining from? His face is shining from the fact that he has the veikut with Hashem, because he is bound up with the source of life. So as a result of that, that life emanates out of his face, because he, the tzaddik, is a physical reflection, so to speak, a miniature reflection of how Hashem interacts with us in this world. And at nighttime, what's strengthened is these four kingdoms. That in Kabbalah, it's explained that those four kingdoms, which oppress the Jewish people collectively, is a macrocosm for the micro level of your neshama, which is like the soul of the world. The Jewish people are the soul of the world. So too, what's the Jewish people within yourself? That's your own neshama, your soul, your mind. And what is causing the suffering or the oppression of the Jewish people, meaning your mind? It's those four kingdoms. Those four kingdoms, which are called Bavel, which are called Paras, which are called Yavan, Greece, and it's called Rome or Edom. So these four kingdoms are actually the expressions of four different types of external wisdom. Secular wisdom. So what is it that actually causes us to go into exile collectively or personally? It's coming from secular wisdom. Now, if you say, David, Yeah, but when we had the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed the second time, it came from Sinat Chinam. It came from the fact that we didn't love each other. So what does that have to do with secular wisdom? So now, think about it. If the Torah teaches that, and Rabbi Akiva says, and Rabbi Hillel says, that the ikar of the whole entire Torah is to love every Jew like yourself, regardless of how close he is to you, how close he is to Hashem, regardless of if he's even done good to you, regardless if chas v'shalom he's done the most horrible things to you, that you love that person like yourself, regardless, because he's Jewish. So what's the reason a person is not able to experience that in his life? Because he has learned from secular wisdom not to. Because if his only influx, his only drawing down of wisdom in his life, his only connection to wisdom came from the Torah, he would ultimately believe to feel to love him anyway, regardless. So what is really blocking him from being able to love his brother like himself, even if he doesn't feel like he feels, even if he doesn't think like he thinks, even if chas v'shalom he has wronged him in his life or continues to? He would have to not have attachment to secular wisdom. He would have to only have been drawing down from the wisdom of Torah. So what is afflicting him and causing him not to love his brother like himself, and therefore to cause the collective Beit HaMikdash to be destroyed, or his own personal Beit HaMikdash, meaning his own space for Hashem to exist in his life, to be destroyed? He needs to have one of these four kingships, or two of them, or three of them, or four of them, all besieging him, all attacking him, and all trying to take away his emunah. Ve'az ikar hakiyum ayadei emunah. And thus, the essence of the establishment of his emunah, how does he create, build, and establish his emunah to know that everything comes from Hashem and that Hashem can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, even if it completely contravenes and contradicts the laws of nature? Al yadei shekorin kriyat shema she'aya mita bechavana. He does this by saying kriyat shema with kavana on his bed before he goes to sleep. Why? Because he's about to go to sleep, meaning that the forces of external wisdom are about to weigh heavy on him, and therefore it's going to cause his emunah to go away. It's going to cause his neshama, his ability to realize that everything comes from Hashem, to go into exile. What's the tikkun for this? That before you go to sleep, before your consciousness takes a rest, first you need to renew your emunah. And you need to say Kriyat Shema, because this is the essential declaration of emunah. Shema Yisrael, meaning listen, you. It's talking about you. You listen, you internalize. Hashem Elokeinu. Yud Kei Vav Kei is our God. Who's Yud Kei Vav Kei? According to Chassidut, it's not just that God exists, it's that he is causing every level of reality at every moment. Nothing is just happening. Everything is being recreated. And if Hashem wants to, he can completely change the laws of nature for you. That's Hashem Elokeinu. Hashem is our God, not the doctors, not medicine, not science. That even they, which is the highest level of secular wisdom, is literally the footstool of Hashem. That Hashem's level of consciousness is so much higher that if he wants to, he can completely contravene that law of nature because he is the cause of it. That according to Rabbi Nachman, that itself is a lower level of hashgacha pratit. That even that is divine providence, which is nature. It's just more concealed, it's more hidden, so it looks like the law of gravity, it looks like the law of attraction, it looks like the law of quantum physics. But in truth, it's really just Hashem. So I'm going to say, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem is my God, not science, not my circumstances in my life, not my trauma history, not my history of abuse and oppression, not my difficult circumstances. Hashem is my God. Hashem Echad. Hashem is one. Not just is Hashem the cause of my life, but everything is Hashem. Now I can go to sleep and have good sleep. Now the sleep I'm going to have is going to refresh me. So when I wake up from my sleep, I'm going to be excited to get up in the morning. I'm going to be excited to run after new levels of understanding of godliness, which Rabbi Nachman says is the whole reason why you're waking up again. Rabbi Nachman says that if you wake up and you are exactly the same today as you were yesterday, you don't try and understand deeper levels of understanding. You don't try and run after getting closer to Hashem today. He says there's literally no reason for you to exist today. You literally were given a new chance to have a higher level of understanding or perception of godliness. That's the only reason why you're here. Because when you leave this level of reality called the physical world, you have no way to run after Hashem anymore. Because you are now in a level of reality which is, so to speak, static. There's no way to change anymore. You are where you are. Here in this world, you can change. Here in this world, you can grow. Here in this world, you can achieve greater and greater heights every single day. You're meant to. And even if you think to yourself, but I'm struggling, I've never been lower. I have issues at home with Shalom Bayit. This person's sick. This person is giving me trouble. This person is causing me financial issues. I myself am not able to achieve the things that I want in my life. So how is today any different from yesterday? Today is worse than yesterday. That's only according to secular wisdom, which is telling you that everything has to be because of a certain circumstance. That all comes from our investment in secular wisdom. But if you understand that nothing has to be, everything is because Hashem wants it to be, that if Hashem wants, He can just change it for you. But to get to the level that Hashem will change nature for you, you will have to really believe that He does. Because Rabbi Nachman says the prerequisite to that level of nace, that level of a miracle, that Hashem will literally just switch the laws of nature for you, it would require that you actually believe that He can. I will give you a story of one of my students. I won't say his name, but he told me, David, I just want to give you a little chizuk. And I know you would enjoy this. He told me, I think it was before Shabbat, a couple months ago. His children, they have real health and developmental issues. Very, very serious health and developmental issues for their children. And one of them specifically struggles even more. And he has seizures as well. And obviously, if you can imagine, your parents, right, they're Bali Tshuva. So they already have experienced so many difficulties just from trying to get close to Hashem, whether it's from their family, whether it's from leaving behind different ways of thinking, whether it's trying to live a completely different lifestyle and a completely different mindset. You know, it's so hard. Every Baal Tshuva knows that it's so hard to really be a genuine Baal Tshuva, to really go all the way with it. Now, let's say not just you do it, but your wife did it as well. Now you have two people in that space that have both, so to speak, had to leave behind certain things in their life, which is causing tremendous emotional, psychological difficulty. And on top of that, now you have children who are sick, right? So obviously the challenges are very, very great. And this person, when I spoke to the husband, and he was telling me about these different issues, I told him about Hibodedut. And ever since I spoke to him about Hibodedut, he on his own has been doing Hibodedut consistently, even from the very beginning. And I didn't know this. And months later, he called me and asked me, hey, just so you know, I've been doing Hibodedut every single day. I felt that it's brought me tremendous peace in my life. I haven't seen a change, but I already feel that there's a greater level of peace. And I just want to know, are there better ways for me to do Hibodedut? Are there different ways that I can do it that are going to help me to gain even more from it? So I gave him some eitzah, some advice. And Baruch Hashem, he's been a tremendously consistent student. And not just in terms of coming and listening to the classes, but practically trying to apply everything that he learns, which is the key to experiencing the blessing from the teachings. It's not just learning it, it's actually doing your very best to do it, even if you're struggling with it. And he has done an incredible job of that. And now a couple months ago, he told me that his son was having seizures, and their doctors told him he had to be on certain medications. And it was the only way to deal with the problem. And according to science, they're right. But because he had been working on Hibodedut for a year, because he had been working on bringing in Rabbi Nachman's teachings for a year, because he's been working on extricating himself from secular wisdom, from working on the Brit, from working on having Shalom Bayit, from believing everything comes from Hashem, X, Y, and Z, and literally living with it to the best of his ability for a period of time now. So he said to his wife, that's it. No more medicine. It's not working. We do this, X, Y, and Z. Hashem is going to help our child. If he's going to get better, it's because Hashem wants him to. I don't want to keep subjugating my child to all the terrible side effects that come from this medicine. Obviously, if he told his doctor this, he would say that he's completely irresponsible, that he is not living in this world, that he has removed himself from reality, and he would feel tremendous lackings within what he's doing. But because his wife as well has been working on this different inyanim of hibodedut, in conjunction with him, has been working on Amunah, has been working on learning Rabbi Nachman's teachings. So I guess between the two of them having this real sense that this is Hashem, and Hashem's going to be the cause of them getting better, they decided not to give them this medication. Now, obviously, that's a very, very hard decision, and there's a tremendous show of faith that you really do believe it's from Hashem. They ended up coming back to the doctor later to take his test, his EKG, to see where his levels of seizures are now. And when they brought him back to the doctors were shocked. And they told him that your son is not having seizures. And he never took the medication. And he said, I just want to let you know that it's unbelievable what a little bit of real emunah and hibodedut can do. And this is the lesson for us. That it's not just about knowing that there's a thing called hibodedut. It's not just knowing that there's a thing called emunah. It's the acts of emunah themselves that show Hashem that you really believe that he's machadesh, that he can change your reality at any moment, right? A person might say to himself, yeah, but my wife is sick. Yeah, but my thing is sick. Maybe I have financial issues, and Hashem hasn't helped me yet. And I'm learning Rabbi Nachman's teachings, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing that, and I'm trying to be shmir at the Brit, and I'm X, Y, and Z. But ultimately, Rabbi Nachman says, if you want a nace, if you want a miracle, and a miracle means that nature has dictated that your life should be a certain way, and now you want him to change that, Rabbi Nachman says you're going to need to get into a state of consciousness that's called Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, in the place that you actually believe and act as if Hashem is the cause of your life, and not the medical condition, and not the psychological condition, not the history of circumstances, and that actually it is Hashem. And you make steps in your life that show that. And what would be the greatest step to show that you really believe things are from Hashem? Obviously, that you speak to him and you talk to him about what's going on in your life. Because if Hashem's the cause of the good in your life, as well as the problems, then what else is there for me to do besides talk to him? That a person's going to say, yeah, but I have to work and support my family, and I have to spend time with my kids, and I have to also have time to relax. So all that's true. You do have to do all those things. But at the same time, you cannot say honestly that if you really believe that Hashem is the cause of your lack of finances, that you have no time to ask him to have help with your finances. That if Hashem is the cause of, let's say, chas v'shalom, your wife has health issues, that you're going to say, I don't have time to speak to you for an hour about my wife's health issues because I have to go work so I can make money so I can send her to the doctor. Because Hashem is the cause of those problems. Ultimately, for you to be able to achieve a nace in which Hashem actually changes your situation, you're going to have to show Hashem that you actually believe he does. And there is no greater show than when you put yourself on Hashem completely. Rabbi Nachman says in the second Sicha, in Sichot Aran, which were the books based on Rav Natan bringing down conversations that Rabbi Nachman had. And he said that really there are very deep levels of understanding that come from these conversations, because Chazal say, the Gemara says, that even the basic conversations of tzaddikim need to be studied. So as a result of that, Rav Natan wrote a book on all of the conversations that Rabbi Nachman had. The second one, he discusses how you need to throw yourself on Hashem completely. What does he mean? He doesn't just mean Shachrit, Mincha, Marv. He doesn't just mean I'm going to learn a little bit of Torah in the morning, maybe even at night. He means that I'm going to throw myself on Hashem completely. That doesn't mean I'm going to lack responsibility in other areas of my life. It doesn't mean I'm going to stop trying to support my family. It doesn't mean I'm going to stop being a good father. It means that I am going to have a time in my day that I literally throw myself on Hashem completely and say, you are going to be the cause of the money that I get. That I'm going to cry to Hashem. I'm going to scream to Hashem that Hashem should help me at work. Not that I'm going to rely on that random person on 47th Street to make that deal for me. That I am going to understand that if that person wants to make that deal with me, it's because Hashem is going to cause that person to want to make that deal with me. And then I'm going to go try and make that deal. But I'm not going to put all of my heart, my mind, my energy into making the deal. I'm going to put all my heart, my mind, and energy into making the deal with Hashem. And then I'm going to go ask the guy. And if Hashem wants him to, he's going to make it work. Bezrat Hashem, tomorrow we are going to continue this lesson to Likutey Halachot at 10:30 a.m. And does anybody have questions from today's lesson?
I'm Rav David.
Yes.
So I'm trying to say like this, like I have a chizuk on what you're trying to say about like that not only about what you said about the Bechor that's not only learning but it's also applying what he's doing, right?
Right.
So I heard this chizuk from my cousin Rabbi Meirov that then in last week's Parashat Vayichi that we saw that Esav. He saw when Esav saw that they're burying Yaakov in Me'arat HaMachpelah, Esav said that he wants to be buried there as well. But Hushim ben Dan, he was disturbed by this, so he went and he chopped off Esav's head, and Esav's head rolled into the Me'arat HaMachpelah. So why does Esav's head so why did Esav has the zechut to have his head buried in Me'arat HaMachpelah? So the answer is that his mind, his head, is full of wisdom of Torah, but his whole body is just only doing more averot. So that's why his body was buried elsewhere, but his head buried in Me'arat HaMachpelah because his head is full of Torah. So I want to bring this into Parashat Bechukotai. It says, Im Bechukotai Telechu. So what does it mean, Im Bechukotai Telechu? Rashi says that a person should toil into Torah. So what's the difference in Rashi like between toiling and walking? So the answer is that not only that we're supposed to learn Torah like fully, but we have to live in the ways of the Torah, doing according what the Torah says, like the way how we talk, the way how we walk, the way how we act. We have to not only that we're supposed to learn Torah and do mitzvot, but we're supposed to do all of this.
Beautiful, David. Beautiful. And just to add to that point, Esav, interestingly and paradoxically, his name comes from the word to do. Esav comes from the word aseh, to do. And like we understand with Esav, he knew a tremendous amount and he didn't do what he learned. Now, who is the tikkun for Esav? So in Kabbalah, it's taught it was David HaMelech. This is the reason why David had curly red hair, just like Esav had curly red hair. This is the reason why David, so to speak, he was able to exert such a tremendous influence on people, just like Esav was able to exert a tremendous influence on people. Except David, even though he had that same connection to the physical world that Esav did, the difference was that ultimately, when he learned in order to do. And this was the tikkun for Esav, that he's the holy version of Esav. And this is what we need to bring into our lives. Any other questions?
We're supposed to, but like I said,
David, I just want to see if anybody else has any other questions. Any other questions from anybody else? Okay. Everybody have an amazing day. I'll see you guys tomorrow.